Why seniors are asking the same question right now. Right now, across the country, many older Americans are quietly asking the same important question. Is this $2,000 payment actually real, or is it about to disappear before it ever arrives? That question isn't coming from greed or impatience. It's coming from uncertainty, from rising costs, and from years of experience watching big promises turn into confusing outcomes. Over the past several days, headlines have been moving fast. Some say a $2,000 tariff dividend check could arrive around Christmas. Others warn that a Supreme Court ruling could shut the whole thing down overnight. When you're retired or living on a fixed income, that kind of back and forth doesn't feel like news. It feels like stress. And that's exactly why it's important to slow this conversation down. This discussion isn't about hype. It's not about political cheering or dramatic predictions. It's about clarity. It's about understanding what is confirmed, what is still undecided, and what seniors should realistically expect and not expect right now. Big legal decisions tied to money have a way of making people uneasy, especially when the information comes in fragments and headlines don't tell the full story. The goal here is to replace confusion with context and fear with facts. Before we talk about checks, timelines, or court rulings, we need to understand why this issue matters so much to seniors and why patience and clear thinking are more valuable right now than reacting to every breaking alert. What the Supreme Court is reviewing and why it matters. At the center of this entire discussion is the Supreme Court of the United States, and for many seniors, that alone is enough to raise concern. When the highest court in the country becomes connected to personal finances, it naturally feels serious, and it is. Right now, the Supreme Court is reviewing the legality of certain emergency tariff measures. These tariffs were put in place on imported goods and have been generating large amounts of revenue for the federal government. That revenue is what has been publicly referenced as the potential funding source for the proposed $2,000 tariff dividend payment. What's critical to understand is this. As of this moment, the Supreme Court has not issued a final ruling. No decision has been announced, no tariffs have been officially struck down, and no refunds or reversals have been ordered. This waiting period, the space between review and ruling, is where uncertainty grows the fastest. It's also where misinformation spreads. Headlines tend to fill the silence with speculation, often using dramatic language that suggests immediate consequences, even when none have occurred yet. For seniors, this distinction matters deeply. A review does not equal a cancellation. A court case does not mean a payment is dead. It simply means the legal process is still unfolding. The Supreme Court's role here is not to decide whether seniors deserve financial relief. Its role is to determine whether the current structure of these tariffs follows the law. That's a legal question, not a financial promise, and those two things often move on very different timelines. Understanding that difference is the first step toward staying grounded while this situation develops. Where the $2,000 payment idea originally came from. To understand why this proposed $2,000 payment keeps appearing in the news, it helps to step back and look at how the idea was first introduced. This was never presented as a traditional stimulus check in the way Americans saw during the pandemic. Instead, it was framed very differently, as a dividend. The concept is based on tariff revenue. Tariffs are fees placed on imported goods coming into the United States. When those goods enter the country, the fees are collected by the Treasury. Over time, those collections can become very large. The administration has repeatedly pointed to these funds as money generated from outside the country rather than from domestic taxpayers. From that perspective, the argument goes like this. If tariffs are bringing in substantial revenue, then returning a portion of that money to the public could help offset rising costs, especially for households feeling financial pressure. That's why the word dividend keeps being used. It suggests shared benefit, not emergency relief. For seniors, that framing matters. A dividend sounds stable, predictable, and earned, very different from a one-time stimulus tied to crisis conditions. But while the language may sound reassuring, the structure behind it is far more complex. Unlike private dividends, government distributions require multiple layers of approval. Revenue must be legally secured, funding mechanisms must be finalized, eligibility rules must be written, and timelines must be established. None of those steps have been completed yet. So while the idea of a $2,000 tariff-based payment exists, the execution remains undefined. That gap between idea and implementation is where confusion often enters the conversation. Understanding the origin of this proposal helps explain why it continues to surface and why it has not yet materialized. How much money tariffs actually generate? When people hear the word tariffs, it can sound abstract, but the dollar amounts involved are anything but small. Over the past year, tariff revenue has climbed into the hundreds of billions of dollars, and long-term projections suggest it could reach several trillion dollars over the next decade. Those numbers are real, and they are the reason this $2,000 payment conversation refuses to go away. Supporters of the idea often point to those long-term projections and say, the money is there. On paper, over 10 years, that may be true. But for seniors, timing matters just as much as totals. Money collected gradually over many years does not behave the same way as money available for immediate distribution. A nationwide payment of $2,000 would likely cost between $300 billion and $600 billion, depending on how many people qualify. That is a massive sum to distribute all at once. Even with strong tariff revenue, covering that cost in a single year would be extremely difficult without borrowing, reallocating funds, or spreading the payout over time. This is why economists often caution against assuming an instant payment is financially simple. Revenue flow and payout timing rarely align perfectly. What looks manageable over 10 years can feel overwhelming in 12 months. For retirees, this distinction is crucial. Long-term revenue potential does not automatically translate into short-term checks. Understanding that gap helps explain why so many announcements sound confident while actual payments remain undefined. Why timing matters more than headlines. One of the biggest misunderstandings in this entire discussion is the difference between long-term potential and short-term reality. Headlines often focus on total dollar amounts, but for retirees, timing is what truly determines financial impact. Tariffs may generate significant revenue over many years, but that money does not arrive all at once. It flows in gradually, month by month, year by year. On the other hand, a $2,000 payment would require a very large sum to be available immediately if it were sent out in a single round. This is why analysts continue to say that a one-time nationwide payout would be difficult without additional steps. The government would either need to wait until enough revenue accumulates, spread the payment over time, or restructure how the funds are distributed. None of those options happen quickly. For seniors, this explains why proposed timelines keep shifting. A Christmas payment sounds comforting, but comfort does not create cash flow. Until the timing problem is solved, no specific date can be taken seriously. This is also why it's risky to plan around headlines. Headlines are designed to capture attention in the moment. They are not designed to reflect the slow, procedural reality of government finance. Understanding that timing, not just money, is the main obstacle helps retirees avoid disappointment and stay grounded while the conversation continues to evolve. The biggest fear: what if the court strikes down the tariffs? One of the strongest fears I've been hearing from retirees lately is simple and understandable. If the Supreme Court rules against these tariffs, does the $2,000 payment disappear instantly? It's a logical question, and it deserves a clear, calm answer. At first glance, the concern seems reasonable. If tariffs are the source of the money and tariffs are removed, then the money must vanish too, right? In reality, government finance rarely works in such a straight line. If the Supreme Court decides that the current tariff structure is not lawful, it does not mean the government suddenly stops collecting revenue. It simply means that this specific method can no longer be used in its current form. Historically, when one revenue tool is blocked, another is introduced. Administrations have multiple legal pathways to impose duties, fees, or similar charges on imported goods. The name may change, the structure may change, but the flow of money into the Treasury often continues in a different form. That's why many experts believe a negative ruling would cause delay, not disappearance. Plans would need to be adjusted, legal language would need to be rewritten, and yes, timelines would likely move further out, but the underlying idea would not necessarily be abandoned. For seniors, this perspective matters. A court ruling is an obstacle, not a final verdict on financial relief. Understanding that helps prevent fear from filling the silence before facts arrive. Why a court ruling doesn't automatically kill the payment. It's important to separate emotional reactions from how policy actually works. When a major court ruling is involved, The immediate assumption is often that everything stops. But in most cases, especially in government finance, that's not what happens. If the Supreme Court rules against the current tariffs, the decision would likely focus on legal structure, not financial intent. The court would be saying that the method used to collect revenue needs to change, not that the government must abandon revenue collection altogether. History shows this pattern clearly. When one policy tool is restricted, lawmakers and agencies respond by designing another. That process can be frustratingly slow, but it is rarely absolute. Adjustments replace shutdowns far more often than people realize. For retirees, this means the conversation does not end with a single ruling. A negative decision may pause momentum. It may require new legislation or regulatory changes, but it does not erase the broader discussion about returning revenue to the public. This is why certainty is dangerous right now, on both sides. Declaring the payment guaranteed is misleading. Declaring it dead is just as inaccurate. The truth sits in the middle, moving at the speed of law and policy, not headlines. Staying aware of that reality helps seniors avoid the emotional whiplash that comes from overreacting to each update. The real cost of sending a $2,000 payment. To fully understand why this payment remains uncertain, we need to talk honestly about cost. Sending $2,000 to a large portion of the population is not a small policy decision. It carries an enormous price tag. Depending on how many people qualify, estimates suggest the total cost could range from $300 billion to over $600 billion. For perspective, that is more than the federal government spends on many major programs in an entire year. This alone explains why careful planning is required. Right now, the tariff revenue collected so far does not cover that cost if the payment were sent all at once. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but it does mean it's complicated. Funding would likely need to be spread out, delayed, or combined with other budget strategies. This is why analysts often say the idea looks more realistic over a longer time horizon. Over 10 years, tariff-related revenue could reach several trillion dollars. In that context, a one-time $2,000 payment appears smaller, almost like a long-term profit share rather than immediate relief. For seniors, this financial reality reinforces an important principle. Affordability on paper is not the same as readiness in practice. Until funding is formally allocated, no payment can move forward. Why affordability doesn't mean approval. One of the most common assumptions in situations like this is that if the money exists, the payment must be inevitable. But in government finance, affordability and approval are two very different things. Even if long-term revenue projections suggest a $2,000 payment could be covered over time, that does not automatically lead to action. Before any money is distributed, multiple steps must occur. Budgets must be negotiated. Legal language must be written. Agencies must receive clear instructions, and eligibility rules must be finalized. None of those steps have been completed yet. For retirees, this distinction is critical. It explains why confident statements often appear long before anything actually happens. Ideas are discussed publicly long before they are implemented privately. This is also why experienced seniors tend to wait for paperwork, not promises. In retirement, stability comes from what is confirmed, not from what is possible. Until Congress, the Treasury, or another official authority announces formal approval, this proposal remains exactly that, a proposal. Understanding this helps protect retirees from false certainty and unnecessary stress. The unanswered question of who would qualify. One of the most important details, and one of the least discussed, is eligibility. Even if a $2,000 payment were approved, the next question would be simple but critical. Who actually receives it? As of now, there are no finalized eligibility rules, no official income limits, no confirmation about whether Social Security recipients would automatically qualify, no clarity on whether retirement income, pensions, or other benefits would be counted. There have been informal comments suggesting that individuals earning under a certain income level, sometimes mentioned as under $100,000, might be considered. But these statements are not commitments. In fact, many analysts believe that if eligibility rules are set, the final thresholds could be significantly lower. For seniors, this uncertainty matters deeply. A retiree living on Social Security alone may qualify under one set of rules but not another. A married couple with modest combined income could be included or excluded, depending on how income is defined. Until eligibility is clearly written into law or regulation, no one can say with confidence who would receive the payment, and anyone who claims otherwise is speculating. This is why it's especially important for retirees not to assume personal eligibility. Expectations built on guesses can quietly undermine financial peace of mind. Why guessing eligibility can be risky for retirees. For people still working full-time, uncertainty can sometimes be absorbed. But for retirees, guessing wrong about income or eligibility can have real consequences. That's why this phase, before any rules are finalized, requires extra caution. When seniors hear that a payment might be available, it's natural to start counting themselves in. After all, many live on fixed incomes and feel the pressure of rising costs every month. But until eligibility rules are clearly defined, assuming inclusion is a gamble. Small details can make a big difference. How income is calculated, whether Social Security benefits are counted, whether retirement withdrawals are included, whether joint income is treated differently from individual income. Each of these choices changes who qualifies and who does not. This is why professionals avoid making promises before guidelines exist. Without written criteria, even experts cannot accurately predict outcomes. For retirees, the safest mindset right now is neutrality. Not optimism, not pessimism, just realism. If a payment happens and you qualify, it becomes a welcome bonus. If it does not, your financial plan remains intact. That mindset protects emotional well-being and prevents disappointment, two things that matter just as much as dollars in retirement. What seniors should avoid doing right now. During periods like this, knowing what not to do can be just as important as knowing what to expect. When large sums of money are mentioned in the news, especially alongside words like stimulus or dividend, it's very easy to start mentally relying on that money before it exists. For retirees, that can quietly create risk. The most important rule right now is simple. Do not plan around unapproved money. Do not delay paying bills. Do not postpone necessary expenses. And do not adjust your monthly budget based on the assumption that a $2,000 payment will arrive. Until something is officially approved, funded, and scheduled, it should not be part of your financial plan. Another serious concern during times like this is the rise in scams. Whenever talk of government payments spreads, scammers move quickly. They know seniors are paying attention. You may receive calls, emails, or messages claiming they can help you claim your $2,000 or asking you to confirm personal information. Please remember this clearly. No legitimate government agency will ever contact you asking for your Social Security number, bank details, or payment in order to release a check. If anyone does, it is a scam. If something feels urgent or confusing, pause, step back, talk with a trusted family member, financial advisor, or official agency before responding. Protecting what you already have is always more important than chasing what might arrive later. Managing the emotional side of financial uncertainty. One part of this situation that often gets overlooked is the emotional toll it can take, especially on retirees. When headlines change daily and money is involved, it's easy to feel pulled in different directions. One day the payment sounds guaranteed, the next day it sounds impossible. That emotional swing can quietly wear people down. For seniors, peace of mind is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Constant exposure to dramatic updates can create anxiety, even when nothing concrete has changed. That's why managing how much information you consume is just as important as understanding the information itself. Not every headline deserves your attention, and not every opinion deserves your trust. Try to focus on what you can control: your routine, your spending habits, your saving strategy, your long-term plan. These are the foundations that support your financial security, regardless of what happens in Washington or the courts. It's also helpful to remember that uncertainty does not mean danger. Many policy discussions take months or even years to resolve. The noise often peaks long before the outcome is known. Staying calm during that process is a skill, and one that many retirees have already mastered through decades of experience. By choosing steady thinking over emotional reaction, seniors protect not only their finances but their well-being as well. What seniors should focus on while waiting. While this situation continues to unfold, the most productive question is not when a payment might arrive, but what should seniors focus on right now? Waiting does not have to mean worrying, and uncertainty does not have to mean inaction. This is a good time to make sure you are receiving every benefit you are already entitled to. Many retirees miss out on programs simply because no one explained them clearly. Reviewing Social Security benefits, Medicare coverage, prescription plans, and local assistance programs can often provide more immediate relief than any future payment. It's also wise to revisit your budget with today's costs in mind. Prices change, expenses shift. A budget that worked last year may need small adjustments this year. Making those adjustments calmly, without pressure, helps maintain control and confidence. Another important focus is communication. If something feels confusing, ask questions. Speak with a trusted family member, a financial counselor, or a reputable advisor. You do not have to navigate uncertainty alone, and you do not have to react quickly to be responsible. For seniors, financial strength is not about predicting every outcome. It's about building flexibility and resilience so that no single decision or headline can knock you off balance. That approach has carried many retirees through far more difficult times than this, and it continues to work. The calm truth about where things stand right now. As we come to the end of this discussion, it's important to bring everything back to one clear, steady truth. Right now, nothing has been finalized. The Supreme Court has not yet issued its ruling. The tariff structure has not been definitively upheld or overturned, and no $2,000 payment has been formally approved, funded, or scheduled. Anyone who claims absolute certainty at this stage is offering confidence, not facts. What we do know is that the conversation is still active. The idea of returning tariff-related revenue to the public has not disappeared. Discussions within government continue, and even in the event of legal challenges, history shows that policy paths often adapt rather than end abruptly. At the same time, there are real hurdles. Legal questions, funding limitations, political negotiations, and administrative logistics all stand between an idea and a check in the mail. Acknowledging those challenges doesn't mean giving up hope. It means staying grounded. For seniors, this balanced view is essential. Retirement is built on stability, not speculation. Headlines are designed to capture attention. Your financial plan is designed to protect your future. Those two things should never be confused. Whether a payment happens next month, next year, or not at all, your security should continue to rest on careful planning, realistic expectations, and calm decision-making. That approach has served you well over the years, and it remains your strongest asset going forward. If this conversation helped you feel more informed, more grounded, or simply less anxious, then it has done its job. You deserve clarity, not fear. You deserve information that supports peace of mind, not pressure. And as always, staying steady, especially when the noise gets loud, is one of the wisest financial decisions a retiree can make.